a lot of clones, I would say, in their games. They had about 32 games in total, and it was short before the crash of the whole business. There was a big video game crash in 1983 and 84, and then this business got very fastly closed. But they were bought by Milton Bradley, and yeah, we will speak to the father of the Vectrex, as we all call him, because he's not really the developer of it. He was the boss of the company. So, but Jay Smith knows everything in this machine, so he's also great to talk to him. And we will have one of the original programmers of the Vectrex with us. And later we will contact with Chris Romero. That is a programmer that is actually working for the Vectrex, because the Vectrex, every year we got some new games for the Vectrex. So this is a very lively community. And you're on the Jitsi bridge.
No, I'm not. I'm on Skype.
Okay. Okay. Jay Smith. Okay, not Jitsi. Yeah. And hopefully we get them
bingo.
all.
There he is.
Hey.
All right.
Okay. Just give me
How are you guys? Yes, good to see you. Jerry, that is
How are you guys?
John and Oliver.
Aye.
And,
Aye.
or Crunchman, I'm sorry, Crunchman.
And we have
No.
about, I would say 30 people here in the room. They're also
Oh, wow.
listening, and I don't know how many people on the stream. We will figure that out later.
Wonderful.
Great.
Yeah, great to see you both. Yeah, we like to chat about the development of the Vectrex, and I think we have the best persons to talk about.
Well, did you get?
That's all we can get together.
Did you get the video running?
Yes, I've shown the video, the intro video for Vectrex Museum, the webpage vectrexmuseum.com, and yeah, I would like to know how you came with the idea of the Vectrex. I think it was you were going out to dinner and found something.
Well, it's interesting. It goes back further than that, really. As you know, we did Microvision and a number of other products, and then we had done the game watches for GCE. We did a series of watches that you played games on, and we were looking. Jerry and I and the other guys in the company were all looking for new ideas. What could we do? What could we do? And among other things, we got very interested in the arcade games that were vector arcade games. And they were, of course, turned out to be very popular. And the question is, what can you do at a reasonable cost? And so, also looking at oscilloscopes, because that's a vector monitor. And some of the guys went out to lunch one day and brought back about a 1 foot long, inch in diameter
Yeah.
CRT.
It was really like a scope too, for some kind of flight thing or something.
It was to go into airplane instrumentation, and you never could hook it up. Is that right?
Nobody bothered to hook it up because it was, electrostatic deflection, and it needed high voltages, and the wires weren't marked and everything. And there's no internet to just look it up in those days, right?
Yeah. So we got involved with what else could you do with it? Wound up getting a little. The idea came, well, could we convert a small CRT into vector scan? And it was a little 5-inch monitor.
Well, there's a company called Ball, and they made self-contained monitor systems that were for OEMs. So it's just a monitor, not in housing, and it had all the connections and everything. So we took that and modified that to become a vector display, and then made up a microprocessor circuit board that would run a game on there, and we actually created an exact copy of Asteroids.
Yeah, not exactly, but
No, it was an exact. Well, no, you didn't. You never saw it because it was never sold in that form.
okay. So
It was not an exact copy of all the levels and all the complications, but I mean it was directly lifted from. It was Asteroids, and that's what it was. It wasn't anything else, and it was just used as a way of shopping it around. So Jay, who's the consummate salesman, although he was shopping it around all over the place. He would like to be interested in this.
So Kenner took an option on it, paid us for the option, looked at it and said, no, we're a toy company. Who thinks video games are going anywhere anyway? They came back and we showed it to Ed Krakauer at GCE, who we were doing the game watches for anyway, and he said, whoa, this is great, but it's got to be bigger. And so give me another idea on that. Out of that, we designed the standalone monitor with a 9-inch CRT. After doing some research and found out that 9-inch CRTs were about as cheap as you could get anything. And we turned the screen vertically, so it was different. Everything in the world, TVs, monitors were all horizontal. We turned it vertical, going to be different, and put it out there. And we're proud to say that it was that little compact screen in a box that was 2 years before the micro.
Macintosh.
yeah.
They claim they did not copy us, so okay.
But let me just throw one thing in here. You might be surprised. Some of us were disappointed when it went from 5 inches to 9 inches. We, believe it or not, we actually thought it would be better 5 inches because there was a possibility that it could have been made battery powered. Because at that point, but once you made, it would take some batteries though. But maybe it could have been.
Also
But
because
once it
you
was
could
9
carry it.
inches.
Also because you could carry it, right? With a loop.
Yeah, you could carry it easier when it was 5 inches, exactly.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a no-brainer. You'd think, oh, of course, the bigger screen is better, but not necessarily.
And interestingly enough, going from the raster scan tubes to the vector scan, you had to change all the coils around the tube and all that sort of stuff. So we created for
Ross, as it says, when you read the histories, it mentions Ross a lot, with the circuitry and stuff, and the concepts.
I wish that the history mentioned Gerry a lot more. He did a number of things involved in that, and the 6809 processor was a big deal.
Well, the prototype was made with that processor, and that was considered, an expensive chip, and we'd only use it for prototyping. So you would use the 6502, which all the games used at the time, and it was very cheap. And we probably should have used the 6502, who knows, But they come back and they go, the powers that be have decided you can use the 6809, even though it costs more. Which, we came from the toy business. I mean, when I met Jay, he was all about toys. All about it.
Engineer gone wrong.
What am I talking about? It's, he's a graduate of Mattel University, they call it. Anybody that worked for Mattel. Is that, am I putting those in?
I went through, that's the engineer gone wrong part. I went through studying at Caltech and TRW where we did the moonshot to Mattel toys.
So when you're designing toys, the chip costs 50 cents more, you're not allowed to use it. So it was amazing that they said, okay, you can use this more expensive chip. We never expected it.
But it allowed us to do a number of really good things with the vector scan and the sound and everything else that we could do. So
how did you program? Which computers do you use to write the programs and the system ROM?
Well, that's a really good question because exactly. We used these IMSI computers. Those early S100 bus. Those.
But you didn't solder it together. So
they had that S100 bus, so we designed a board. It was like a shared memory emulator board, we had to design that from scratch. I don't have any, I don't think I have any, I don't know. But that a whole operating system we designed, and there were people that were assigned just to do the operating system for that, and that allowed us to plug a 40-pin cable onto where the 6809 socket would go in the Vectrex, and plug from that to the S100 bus on the inside. And we were editing in WordStar, which is, ridiculous.
Oh.
There's no,
what language is it written in? Is it?
It's all assembler. There's no other language. Because like in those, the computers were so slow, there was no chance of having a compiler that would be able to compile a language, at least at that, with any reasonable amount of speed.
One of the interesting things that I remember, I obviously wasn't programming, but that we had some problems with the computers that took a long time to diagnose, and it turns out that it was the programmers were smoking when they were programming, and the smoke, was it in the hard disk?
I'm not sure.
Or the floppy disk. It had 8-inch floppy disks that you did in and out, and it really wound up, I think one of the problems was smoke got in the hard disk and created some problems. So we finally had to say, smoke in the hall, you can't smoke next to your computer.
I forgot about that. That's funny.
So then,
I wanted to just define a little protocol. It's really hard sometimes to interrupt because you got this delay and lag. So if I want to say something or you want to say something, just hold up your finger like that, and then we'll stop talking and let the other person know.
Good idea.
I wanted to
Not
also,
immediately, but
yeah, of course, give the person a chance to finish. One of the things I was going to ask you through assembly language, so you have basically write a piece of code, and you've got an 8-bit register, and that 8-bit register would basically define the position of the dot on the screen. Is that right? And then you would program.
No.
How does that work? Just give us a little example in pseudocode or whatever, how you would move a trace from one position of the screen to another. Just how does that work programmatically?
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't want to interrupt you while you're asking the question, but basically, there's the only absolute position on the screen is the center of the screen. So there's a command that you give the hardware to zero out the coordinate, to basically 0, 0x and 0y, right in the middle of the screen. But after that, everything else is relative. So you can draw a diagonal, you can draw straight up, you can go out in any direction, and then so it's sort of like a fireworks show, you can move the beam, you can turn off the beam and move the beam up to here, then you can turn on the beam and start drawing a shape. And what happens is everything's going great, but after a while it starts drifting because all of this is all being held in capacitors. It's holding the charge, which determines all the x and y position. So after a while it starts drifting, then you have to bring it back to 0 again.
Oh, wow.
okay. And which problems occurred when you were developing the Vectrex? So what was the hard part?
Well, the hard part was, I've read about it since then, and I didn't remember this part, but it's easy to remember once you read about it. The schedule was nuts. They were demanding the whole thing to be designed and have, 12 games finished in 4 or 5 months or something? It was ridiculous. Because you design the hardware, and then as the games started getting developed, you get ideas for ways of improving the hardware, but then you couldn't do that. You couldn't improve the hardware because then all the game programmers would be behind schedule. So that was a frustrating part there.
And have you managed to hold the line to get it done in time?
yes, we did. It was a spectacular schedule. GCE committed in September, perhaps, something like that, August, September, and in June, we were at the Consumer Electronics Show in Chicago with 12 prototypes and pieces of 12 games, and at least 6 of them were complete and running.
These are,
What year was this?
In which year was that?
1982.
82. Yeah.
Oh, well, 80, this is the 82 Consumer Electronics Show, so we were starting in 81.
Yeah. Okay. By the way, there was this rumor in the Vectrex community all the time because of the Macintosh design and the Vectrex design. The Vectrex design 2 years earlier is on the market, and when you place them next to each other, they look very the same. But, yeah, and people really said, now why didn't they sue Apple? So, and I got in contact with the original case designer of the Macintosh 1984, J.C. Manock, and I asked him. I asked him right away and said, hey, was there any influence of the Vectrex design for the Macintosh case design? And he said, no, before you mentioned the Vectrex for me in this email, I didn't knew about it. So you can be sure he didn't copy it. So
of course not.
This rumor really has found an end on that.
right, he was in the electronics business and he never heard of Vectrex. That's quite possible.
Yeah, he never did.
One of the things, going back to a slightly different subject, is we had debated quite a bit about vector scan. What were some of the advantages of vector scan? Obviously, the fact that we could do that on a CRT with a relatively inexpensive electronics. But the other thing was that vector scan, you can zoom and rotate figures very easily. At that time with video games, if you wanted to increase the size, you had to have a new image for each size. So you had to store all those images. If you wanted to rotate it, but as you can see with Vectrex, things disappeared and the distance came, rotated, did all of that very easily. And at that time, that was very unique. Now it's, of course, very common. But one of the unique things about it was the zoom and rotate.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Were there other ideas to name it other than Vectrex? Were there other names before?
Yes.
I don't remember, but GCE went through quite an interesting naming process. And I don't remember it. They had another name that I liked better, and they liked.
I remember Vectron.
But they couldn't get it cleared, and they said, "Oh, we'll have to settle for Vectrex." And of course, now that's the common name.
I liked it. I think it's a good name. I like it very much.
Worked out fine, and then as you know, we went on to, with our experience with Microvision, the handheld, with actually just a quick comment with Microvision, did you know, I guess it's common knowledge, that the Microvision console does not have a microprocessor in it. One of the projects I worked on doesn't play here, but it was called Major Matt Mason. Interestingly enough, Mattel, the name Mattel, became because it was Matt and Elliot. Matthew and Elliot were the two founders of Mattel. Mattel.
Okay.
And so they came up when getting into space was starting to be popular and interesting. They came up with a doll, a boy's doll, called, if you do a doll for a boy, it's called an action figure.
Yes.
For a girl, it's called a doll. Gotta be careful. And so they came up with an action figure called Major Matt Mason. And I spent a lot of time on that. Then went on from there to a small company where we got involved in toys, licensing toys, and then formed Smith Engineering, which out of that later, part of that became Western Technologies. And actually. As that grew and grew, we did a merger, and it became a company called Wanderlust, which bought my company, and then we changed the name to, what was that? Anyway, we became a NASDAQ-listed public company.
Yeah.
Went on, so I'm out of that business now, back to playing with things.
Is it right that your son was the only beta tester for all the games?
He was one of the beta testers, and of course, that's one of the great stories of the microvision, the Mindstorm game on Vectrex. All the programmers did the testing. Son Spencer did a lot of the testing, and several other people worked on it, but never had a chance to have it for hours and days at a time. And if we did Mindstorm, he came up, and none of the programmers could get by level 11. And so we thought, well, we'll be a level 12 and a level 13. And for whatever reason, then you had a game that was the end. You ended the thing. Don't ask. I don't know why we did it, but we did. So we ended it at level 13. And literally within a week after the game was released, all kinds of people went through 11, through 12, through 13, and then into what then became known as the dust levels. It was never programmed for that. Nobody in the company had ever gone there, and everything that happens after that was accidental. And so, and fortunately, the dust levels sort of played, and I have heard like people getting up into the 20s. Have you?
I don't know if they did.
In the dust levels, if you've ever seen or heard about it, a lot of things are invisible and disappear, and things happen on the screen. You can't see what's going on. You have to kind of guess what you're doing. But it's a popular thing for people who are really good at it. So, that was fun.
Didn't they issue a fix for that or something?
Yeah, the Milton Bradley, I understand, which Milton Bradley issued a fix, which went, most of the U.S. games still had the problem.
Mindstorm
And that
cartridge,
reminds me
right?
of- that information came from Chris Romero, who, if we had had a chance, would have been great to have him here. I'm sure you've talked to Chris.
Yes.
He's the world's expert that I know of on Vectrex right now. He knows much more than I do about what's going on currently.
Yeah. We will try to get him on this after we've talked with you. We try to put him onto this conversation, so we have you all three here. We hope to get this will work
That's
out.
good.
Yeah.
Then,
I'm missing a Tetris clone. Did you ever thought about a Tetris clone for the Vectrex, because it would be easy with the graphics?
what?
Tetris? Tetris?
Tetris.
Tetris.
Was Tetris around?
I don't think that's right. It wasn't around to our knowledge, because, that came out on Game Boy. Apparently it existed in Russia or something, but we didn't know about it until it came out on Game Boy, which was about 3 years later, right?
Yeah, it came out later.
Okay, it came out later?
But,
Really?
but you're talking about how people are programming Vectrex nowadays. They could try Tetris.
Yeah.
I went to Russia in 1988, and I met the person who wrote Tetris when I was in Moscow.
Oh.
And this was in 1988, and at that point in time, I believe just shortly after that was when Tetris came out, if I recall.
But we went on to later look at trying to do Vectrex in a handheld.
Yeah, talk about that, please. That was one of the
And,
questions that we also have in the Q&A, but we can come to it now.
One of the things that the way we based that on is, I've forgotten his name, but there was a gentleman in England that was doing some great things with devices, and he had a little handheld CRT-based TV, I guess, and it was a CRT, but it turned 90 degrees if if the CRT went like this horizontally, the screen was actually here, and the coils around the screen were designed to move the electron beam 90 degrees.
Wow.
So that the screen, the CRT was, if it was this long, the screen was horizontal like that. And so we thought, whoa, here we go again. You get a CRT and turn it into Vectrex. But from what I remember, they were saying, and I believe this was Milton Bradley at the time, no, we've been there, done that, the Vectrex, and decide what good are handheld games going to be. And then, guess what? No. And so we did a lot of interesting stuff with that. We tried color, the Vectrex.
Yeah.
And Rick Morgan has our color prototype. But if you remember, a color tube was much more expensive than a regular CRT. It was black and white or whatever, because you had to have 3 electron beams. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
I think 3 electron beams. But what we came up with is the idea of coating the tube with different layers of phosphorus, so that depending how strong the electron beam was, it would get to the first level or the second level and in between. So you had sort of 3 colors, one at the first level, one in between, and one at the second level. And we actually made a CRT, made a prototype, and it worked, but again, Milton Bradley said, no, been there, done that. And the limitation of the color was that you actually had to change the voltage from, I'll make up a number, 18,000 volts to 22,000 volts or something like that to change the colors. And of course you can't do that instantly. So you had to be a little careful about what you were doing changing colors. And if somehow the electron beam got too strong, it went all the way through and went a little blank spot on the screen, which our color prototype has a little blank spot on it.
Okay.
But the nice thing about it was you didn't have to have a color CRT. You could use a one-beam CRT and just change the voltage on it.
But before, yeah, we have to tell this maybe a few people who don't know the Vectrex so good. It was in a blue shiny line design, and you could put overlays on the front screen to have colors. So
yes,
every game.
And that's what we did on the original Vectrex, is to have the overlays, and created a feeling of color, particularly in the TV commercials. Worked great. So.
Oh no! Even when you play it, there are a few overlays that are really good. It shows you the color. So.
Well, we were very proud of the fact that there are at least a dozen really innovative features of the Vectrex that hadn't been done before, and
3D glasses. 3D glasses, right?
Yes. That had the rotating screen. Have you seen the 3D glasses?
I had it on yes, I tested it. It is you have a rotating yeah, like a CD where you can look through it. There's two or three different colors.
Yeah.
Three different colors in different sizes, and it rotates 80 times per second in front per minute or per minute in front of you. So you always have this. You are a little bit stuck in the movement because it's rotating and rotating. After half an hour playing, you get. Yes, right. It's really, this is 3D in the very first stage. You get a little bit, your stomach gets a little bit strange after half an hour because it's not real 3D. So you get a little bit strange there. Yeah. And a light pen.
And the light pen?
The light pen, we were really into light pens. We had some computers with light pens, and that was an input device that was used at the time.
The Fairlight CMI used the light pen so you can draw the waveform of the music that you're going to play and also draw the spectrum. I actually developed something on the Apple II with Forth, and I used the Mountain Hardware music board along with Forth, and also used a graphics card to calculate the fast Fourier transforms needed to make the waveform.
Wow, that's impressive.
If you ever saw the light of day, we sure had a lot of fun with it.
That Fairlight, that was a rather expensive piece of equipment, wasn't it?
It sure was, but I did it on an Apple II.
Oh, nice.
That is
Very nice.
way back. Wow.
Yeah, love it. Nice job there. Did you do other things in music after that, I guess?
Oh, I've sort of experimented around just most recently with the music program. I can't remember off the hand. If you go to SoundCloud.com to JD Crunchman, you'll find a song I did called Space Station, and it did it using the German company here that made it. Don't remember.
Ableton?
Yeah, Ableton Live. That's it. Yeah, Ableton. Thank you.
Ableton.
And that's about the last I've done music. About 2 or 3 years ago, I was over in where was it at? Somewhere in Malibu Beach, I think, with some friends, and we spent the whole weekend, and I got really wild with it. Just check out the song. It's a psychedelic trance song. It's pretty trippy.
Well, as you know, Malibu Beach is just up the road from us here. It's about 5 miles away.
We're talking about music, Gerry. I heard that there is a missing capacitor somewhere on the main board. Is that right?
Oh, that's what, you must have been talking to Chris.
Okay. Isn't it that there is missing some capacitor for the
Yeah, it has to do with this whole thing of rushing this thing out, So, nobody tried to program the voice on this thing until it was already shipped. Like, they gave me the assignment of programming the voice for, not Skype. What the hell's that guy's name? The character on the Vectrex. It sounds like Skype. There's a character, but it's not Skype. Yeah, I can't think of the name of it now.
But this was, among the other first, was a voice in the game.
Yeah.
Spike. Why can't I?
Spike.
Oh, Spike. Yeah.
Spike.
Skype. Right.
Spike.
Right. Spike. So while programming that, I realized, oh my God, the hardware could have been done better on that. That's so sad. Didn't seem to be any time to really test that or something. I don't know if you can believe how frantic this thing was. I was so sad that I didn't. And then and this one of the things that I realized, Chris had asked me, he was very interested when I mentioned this, because he's knows everything about Vectrex there is to know. So I looked at the schematics, and it was like, oh my God. See, one of the things was we were in toys. Jay was a toy guy, right? So this video game thing, the toy mentality, at least in my mind, was still there, which was, I don't know if it was in your mind, but in my mind it was like everything has to be the cheapest possible. That was the thing with the toys. If you could save 2 cents, you were a hero, and you get a promotion. It was unbelievable. So there was an op-amp. That's the type of chip called an op-amp on there. And an op-amp comes in 1 section or 2 sections or 4 sections. And the chip would cost a little bit more if it was 2 sections into 1 chip. It would cost a little bit more if there was 4 sections in 1 chip. So I'm looking at the schematic, and what I did on this thing, I was the one to blame for this. I put a 4-section one, and then to save money, I put a 2-section one as the second chip. It needed 2 chips, because I only needed the 2 sections. So, I'll save 3 cents, and then we could, this will be great, but what I didn't realize, number one, inventory costs. I never thought about that. It actually costs more to have two different chips than you could have the same chip. And then besides that, if I had used the 4-section chip, then I could have used one of those extra sections that wasn't used to help with the voice thing. And the capacitor that I mentioned to him. So I've got to get back to him with all the details on that. But it just makes me, it's like, first of all, who knew this thing would be around 30 years later? And secondly, I don't know, it's just hard to get this, to bang these things out instantly. How do you do it?
It was still stands as the fastest great project.
Does this mean that if you put in the right capacitor on this board where it belongs to, then the sound would be better?
Well, yeah, I was looking at it. It might need also this other op amp. I'll have to think about it. Unless somebody out there, there's so many people who seem to be into this thing. If somebody else wants to figure it out, that's fine. Or I'll look at it, and it may need more than the capacitor. I had teased him by telling him it only needed the capacitor. It might need another chip too, not a sound chip, just this little op amp thing, which costs like a dime for the whole chip.
But with all that, he got Spike to say something. That was cool.
Yes, that's right. Sounds weird, but he says something.
Right. Well, it also had to do the video at the same time as speaking, so it gets a little complicated there.
Yeah, well, didn't you had breaks between the game?
Well, there's a break in the game action, but if you look at it, he's actually putting up a picture of Spike talking, which takes some doing also. Not even though the game is paused during the speaking.
Yeah.
I don't know why that reminds me of one of the limitations of drawing the vectors is that you can only draw so much vector. You can use a little bit on this item and a little bit on that item and a little bit on that item, but every cycle of the processor is that 20 milliseconds or something?
Yeah, the frame, well, you're talking about frame rate.
Yeah.
Should I?
Yeah.
Well, so the thing is, on a modern game or on a computer, there's a fixed frame rate, right? Like it's, whatever, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 frame rate per second. But on Vectrex, you just try to put as many objects up, and then you repeat it, and that's the frame rate. So some of the games. Oh, are we disconnected? I wonder. I wonder. Yeah, because they can't seem to hear.
Sorry, I talked to the techno.
No, I was just hoping it's still here.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, no, it's just so the frame rate. If you see on some of the games, the frame rate gets really slow because you have to put up all these objects. So they might go down to what? I don't know how far it went down. 16 or 10. I don't even know.
The problem is that you have to keep it visible on the screen, you have to refresh it.
Yeah.
And if you draw and draw and draw and draw and draw, eventually the beginnings will disappear.
Yeah.
So you can only draw so much before you have to go back and refresh it.
But see, if you compare it with something like a regular video game like the Atari video game, the VCS Atari, that was played on a TV. So on that, there was no choice. You had to do the frame rate of the TV or it just wouldn't work. But with Vectrex, you could push it, and you could put more junk up on the screen at the expense of the frame rate if you chose to.
Yeah, the Vectrex today has a very lively community. Every year there are coming some new games out for the Vectrex. I think we are not more than 3,000 people who play it. So it's really, I think it's not more. I'm not sure. Nobody knows it correctly. Yeah.
Is it still being developed in assembly language, or have they decided to use a higher level language to develop some of these newer games?
We will try to get Chris on the line.
Yeah.
He's the one we need to ask.
He really knew the new stuff, I would say.
Yeah, I would say that, of course you have to ask Chris, but I don't even know if you can get assembly language on a lot of these things these days, or people just think you're crazy if you're...
This year a card came out and you can do it in 32 bits also.
I saw that one on the
It's
website.
going. That will be interesting, I think.
Well, it sounds like they're using a 32-bit chip to create programming statements for the 6809 on the fly. There's like literally just coming up with changing it's just unbelievable. Yeah, and okay, ask Chris.
Yeah, we have here a Ask a Speaker module at our page. I also want to tell the people about it. When you're going to the schedule page at geekfestberlin.com, there is an Ask a Speaker on the right bar, panel 1, panel 2, panel 3, and we are actually at panel 1 and day 1. And everyone, even the people on the stream that are listening from all over the world, can ask questions here to our panelists. And because the Vectrex is so lively, there are already a few ones.
I might also want to add that we are also have a hash code on Twitter,
Right.
GeekFest Berlin. So you can also tweet your way.
Yeah, invite
into our
some
consciousness.
other geeks. Invite some other geeks, please. Right? Do some spreading the word about GeekFest. And some people asks, and there's a voting on the best questions, so the best questions come first. But you can't vote on your own question, so the others have to vote for it. So that's very cool. And I just try it here with Melbourne. It says, Mr. Smith, the Vectrex community, even decades after the publishers have abandoned the system, is very much alive. New games and utilities are created regularly, especially this year has seen many new games, tools and hardware. Really, that is much hardware also. Do you in any way still follow current Vectrex development and releases, and what do you think of them? So this goes to you, Jay.
I go through periods when I follow it and get very interested in it, then I will not look at it for a while. And again, Chris provides me with an update on that stuff. I think some of this is just absolutely amazing. In what Gerry just mentioned, a 32-bit processor.
That he mentioned.
Well, you mentioned, and then Gerry filled in on that. I think that's just phenomenal. And the fact that by doing all that, they're extending what we could do on the screen much more, and that's really exciting. I think that's great.
The new games have 3 times more objects to download. It's so flowing around the screen. It's amazing what they do with this old hardware, what they get out of it in the last
I think
years.
It is amazing.
Everybody involved wishes that we had more time, because we could have done more and better and more and better.
Yeah.
Would it have been better to wait a year and introduce it a year later? We did it right getting out when we did, because the video game crash came along and took us all.
There are other questions. This one is from Vectrex Matt, a known name in the Vectrex community.
Vectrex Matt.
Jay Smith, do you recall anything about some stress tester units put in shopping malls and based on the Vectrex? The stress tester.
You mean like a kiosk or something?
Okay.
Now that it's mentioned, I heard about that somewhere. They took units and put them in a little kiosk in a mall.
But if you don't remember, you.
I don't. I remember vaguely hearing about that at one time. I don't remember hearing it called a stress test, but I thought that was something that somebody did maybe to make quarters on the machine. I don't know.
In fact, I think they used the monitor. So and some parts of the I think they wrote their own program to run it on it, and you had a color test, so it was kind of strange. But okay, if you don't have much to say about that, we go to the next one. Jay Smith, it's also from Vectrex Matt. He had a lot of questions to you. Jay Smith, I appreciate you may not know the answer to this, as this is likely happened after MB brought GCE. But do you recall anything about a computer prototype with keyboard for the Vectrex?
Again, no, not that I was involved. I have heard about that, though, and that is really interesting, to essentially use the Vectrex as a monitor for being a personal computer.
Yeah.
I started to work on that for a crack hour.
Here.
Well, I had started to work on that, by the way. I was just going to mention, but it got canceled. I started to get some code up there. It was going to be have basic, and actually found some basic from these guys that had some basic they were willing to sell, already done. So just had to do the graphics part, and it got canceled partway through the development of it.
Okay.
So it never went anywhere.
But you worked for a company that would like to bring this out as a computer.
Well, it was the guy, the head of GCE, wanted to develop it, and then he changed his mind or something. I'm not sure.
After
Oops.
Ed Krakauer built up the internal staff at GCE and took it over to push it further on, and Gerry spent some time working with him.
But it didn't. It's funny because it could have. Actually, it would have been a little weird because you couldn't have that many lines of text. But we were going to see what what it looked like and everything. It would have been interesting to be able to calculate stuff, right?
Well, another feeling behind Vectrex was that the kids who were using it as a game could take it to their room. The homes at that time didn't have 5 different TVs all around the home, and the kid didn't have a TV in his bedroom. It was one in the house, or maybe 2. But with the Vectrex, you take the game into the kid's bedroom and play with it. And
you don't are in the main room and blocking the TV of Daddy.
Yes,
that was a good selling point for sure. We have about half an hour now. We didn't expect it to have Chris Romero here today on the panel. We just talked about it yesterday. So we tried to get him onto this conversation. Maybe when we add him now to the conversation, this will stop and we have to reconnect. We will see how this works, okay?
Okay, well, if all else fails, send me a text or an email.
Yeah, let's see how this works. Hopefully he's in front of the computer.
We're still on, okay.
So far, so good. Whoops.
What's that?
Blame it on Skype.
You want a Diet Coke?
No thanks.
Okay, we have sound. Now there maybe comes a video, and there.
Hey!
Oh.
Hi, hi, Chris.
Whoa.
How you doing, gentlemen?
Hi, Chris. Greetings from Berlin.
Nice beard. Wow.
Good
Where-
to see
Oh,
you.
thanks.
Where are you, Chris?
Chris Romero.
And where? Who? No, in which city you are? Sorry.
Oh, I'm in the West Coast in the United States in Pacifica. So you can visualize that as about 10 to 15 minutes south of San Francisco.
Ah, nice.
He's got the logo.
Yeah, and you
Yes.
you are very involved in the let's name the modern Vectrex community. And Jay said you could tell us a little bit about the actual Vectrex scene.
Oh yeah, well I mean, I like the Vectrex. I collect them. Do a little back-end support on some stuff, on some projects. Definitely, and just mostly enjoy the Vectrex.
Tell us about your T-shirt in the background.
The T-shirt right now is just one of the fan-created T-shirts that were sold throughout the years. I think we're seeing more and more of those. In fact, Binary Star shipped T-shirts with their recent release of Nox and of Death Chase, which, if you haven't heard of that yet, is reimagining the original game that was so controversial so many years ago. But other stuff in the background right now, you can see there's Vectrex related stuff that was produced over the years. Some of these things are marketing related, and certainly that little block behind my head is. Maybe not kind of the same guys as the Vectrex pen that was released by Milton Bradley, or maybe even you released it, Jay, a long time ago as part of the initial marketing materials you were working with GCE.
Can I shortly stop? Jay, can you click one time of your camera on your camera icon, and because your camera view is freezed?
Oh no! Really?
Is click on the camera icon. So
That's actually looks like a.
Chris, have you heard about the 32-bit cartridge that is just coming out?
That's the call.
okay.
Absolutely,
So
I've heard about the Vectrex 32 cartridge.
I'm going to click. I'm going to click
it's
on the camera
great.
icon. I hope it works. Is that
Sure.
going to work?
No, but we have a very nice screenshot of you.
Okay. Then it comes back.
They're coming back. Okay, John?
Let me ask Chris a question.
Now we're.
Chris, earlier I had asked a question from the other guys about the current development of Vectrex software, and I was wondering which languages you guys have evolved from the old primitive assembly language into a more higher level language, perhaps like C. And I was wondering, have you migrated to the higher level languages now to help speed up development?
Well, certainly there is a couple of languages out there. We've seen a university offer a course that was in C. Several of the students wrote new software. In fact, there's a whole page dedicated to the projects that the students produced that were in C. Some of the developers dropped back down into assembler again to either optimize their code or for various reasons. There's the Vectrex 32 cartridge, which is based around BASIC, so a live version of BASIC running live communication with the Vectrex at the time, more or less using the Vectrex as a display terminal almost in the same way as maybe the original, well, at least what we saw, the planned add-on, keyboard add-on that's basically inside of it. Maybe that added it the same way as the Vectrex 32 is done today. There's been Logo, which is offered by Alex Nicholson, more commonly known on the web as Vectorzoa. If you've seen his site on vectorzoa.com. So there's been a few different higher level languages offered than just
Okay. Jay, are you still there?
I'm still here. I see our little screen at the lower right. So can you see me?
No, we don't see you. So we are coming now to the Q&A section here also in the room. I like to ask if here is someone in the room who likes to address a question to our speakers.
Also, we have some people on Twitter, and one of our guys here has probably monitoring some Twitter feeds and seeing what anybody had asked with the hashtag Twitter as well. So maybe you can gather some of those questions as well.
Yeah, but when we don't have questions here in the room, I would go over and use the Q&A, the questions that are online here. And Jay, you can hear us?
I can hear you fine, and
Okay.
the strange thing is we can see our image in the lower right of the screen.
Okay.
But-
We we are on audio connection, that's fine. So, what is the next question here? Jay Smith, most of the Vectrex game catalog used the analog stick in digital mode. When implementing an analog joystick with analog to dialogue conversation hardware on the Vectrex, were you disappointed afterwards that only a couple of games made use of the analog functionality?
That's a good question.
That is a good question. Yes, I was disappointed. I was a big supporter of making an analog joystick instead of just a switch. And it turned out not to be used very much. And makes me wonder if we could have saved 2 or 3 cents doing that. But whatever. Yes, I was disappointed.
Okay. And then we have a question of 50TBRD, that's his name. And he says, or asks, Jay Smith, over the years, several Vectrex prototype games have emerged, including Pitches Duel, Tour de France, Dark Tower, and mostly recent Mail Plane. These games seem to be in a pretty complete state. The Vectrex Enthusiast community wonders a lot about how far along 3D pole position was before its release was complete.
I really can't help you very much with that. That was beyond the point that, as Smith Engineering and Western Technology, that's beyond the point we were intimately involved with. GCE had taken over the development, was doing those developments, as Gerry mentioned, with the keyboard. So, no, I can't really add to that.
Okay. A very technical question from Vectrex Matt. Jay Smith, on the Vectrex card port, there's a signal line, pin 35, on the Vectrex CAT connector, taken directly from the 6522 PIA, and it is a software controlled line. Was this intended for any future specific hardware or just included as good computer design practice?
I'll have to get Gerry to
Sure.
answer that. I don't know.
Well, I'm here. I mean, I would have to look at does it label? Does that pin have, usually the signals would have a label that would be on the cartridge, so it would give you a hint for what it was. Maybe interrupt or something, or I wonder if the questioner can be asked if the thing is labeled.
Okay.
I think it's labeled external line.
Ha! It's maybe labeled external line, some of the audience says.
Oh.
Whoa.
Well, Chris, have you seen? I don't have the schematic with me. Chris sent me the schematic a couple of months ago, which was great, or more than that even, which was great to see it again and everything. But I don't have it with me right now.
Chris, do you have an idea about that question?
Well, certainly the external line has been used for it past what the original error was, has been used in some things like a multi-Vectrex setup to where you can play games head-to-head. But really the idea is, or the question to me is were there any other things that you'd plan to do with the Vectrex beyond what was done, let's say, with the 3D imager, with the light pin, some other external, perhaps some external add-ons that were going to use pin 35 to access the other capabilities of the controller that's on the Vectrex to do other multiplexing, let's say with the joystick interface, or with the other chip, with the chip that was used to do all of that kind of real-world interfacing. Were there any other purposes that you had in mind for the future for developing external hardware that access the Vectrex directly via the expansion port?
Well, the interrupt line, of course, was in that direction, which made the light pen and the goggles and everything. That was important to have that interrupt out there. That's on one of the pins, and that's an important one. But it's in 35. I'm just curious to go see what that 35 is. I don't know what it is. But you were really asking what other things were planned. What other things were planned?
I think they had laid out a kind of a wide range of things, hoping for the success in the future. And the video game letdown is the one that kind of dragged all that down and put it all in the file in the closet that hadn't been opened again. So I can't really add a lot to that. I think in our imagining the future, we could think of almost anything you could use a display for, and what could that be? Because we intended that the kids could take that in their room. What else could they do? But I think for the stuff that was really planned, they got a little piece of everything with the light pen, the 3D imager, the color, and the keypad. No, I don't know of more.
Yeah.
Because, by the way, with the 3D imager, you could use it just for color if you wanted it, right? It didn't have to be 3D, so that you could have a faster frame rate if you just wanted color. Just to point that out. But this 35, I wonder if it was just there was an extra pin, and there was an extra pin on that chip, the 6522 chip, and maybe we put this pin out there for future. Maybe that's what happened.
Can I, short, we don't get your image for about 5 minutes now, since we have added Chris Romero to the chat. We have to figure that out a little bit. Can you, Jay, stop?
You want to log in again?
Stop the video, and there's an icon when you move your cursor around over the Skype window. There should be 4 icons.
Yes.
And there is one that is a camera. It's the first icon. Could you click on that and click again, so we maybe get this channel open again?
When it first happened, yes, I tried that, but let me do it again. First time, I will click now.
Okay.
And
something.
now my image, our image disappears from the lower right. The screen's the same. If I click it again, the image appears on the lower right.
Says him to call back.
Yeah.
And so,
Just a short note, when Jay is speaking and has clicked his camera back on, I know I can see it at least on my end. So maybe calling back in would help.
Yeah, I think so too. We because we want to see you both on the screen when we are ending this talk. So we stop this call now. And Jay, would you call us back in a second when we have ended this call?
I will.
Okay.
We'll call back.
Okay, Chris, thank you for being part here and
Sure.
representing the modern Vectrex community. And yeah, I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, and Chris, thank you very much. I really appreciate that email that had the dozens of things.
Thank you.
Very well.
Yeah.
So we stop here now. And yeah, Jay Smith, just call us back, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Bye, Chris.
Bye, Dave.
Bye, Chris.
Bye, guys.
Okay.
Bye.
We switch this. So let's hope he's coming back. This Is this the chat?
Yeah.
Okay.
Never depend on Skype anymore.
Disconnect our other call.
All right, we're back.
We're back.
Okay. So, well, hi. That was great to get Chris on.
Yeah, it's a funny community on Facebook. There's only one Vectrex group, user group, and there are about 1,200 people in it. So it's really not that big. But every year there are coming 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 new games for it, and these people are producing this game, and they will not sell more than 100 pieces of it. So that's the figure you have to work with, and so the prices are mostly so below the really work that has been gone into these games. So yeah, they just try to get the costs back, but they will not charge the programming, I think. And I see you found a Vectrex there.
Yeah, it was right here behind us, so it was just being hidden. So
Yeah, and you tried last time, and the one you tried was defect. Did you found?
yeah, and I went to another one and got it working. This one, although it's not plugged in, works great.
Yeah.
I had Mindstorm on there and Armor Attack, and actually played them a little bit and remembered. Wow, it was great.
Yeah, I like. Is it a buzzing one or a non-buzzing one? This.
Buzzing, that buzzing one.
Oh no, it's a non-buzzing one.
Wow.
So-
Just to know you, the normal Vectrex, when you switch it on, then it makes a buzzing sound, so it's always making bzzz. Because the electronic was a little bit too near on the tube, I think, or was it something like that?
Why don't you fire that sucker up?
Yeah, okay. Hang on a second.
Yeah, I like the buzzing one. I have the buzzing one, and I like it. It must make bzzz all the time.
Well, it's sort of like on phone calls. They have to have that quiet, that sound going. They have to have that hissing sound all the time, or you don't know if the person is there. They add that in, that sound, that shh, comfort noise, they call it, phones. So we had an accidental comfort noise on Vectrex.
Well, actually, that hissing sound you used to hear when you make a long-distance call, that really wasn't put in there intentionally. It was just the carrier noise multiplexing the phone lines. I think they break it down into this T1. T1 has 32 or 24 phone connections, and it's just that residual noise from multiplexing. So, and now that's pretty much gone now since everything switched over to digital now.
Well, really.
Talk
So
about that in more detail tomorrow.
when you're on your cell phone, is there any hissing? I guess I've forgotten. Is there any or not on a digital cell phone?
What about the digital phone again? I didn't hear that.
When you're on your phone, you're on your Android or your Apple phone. Is there any hiss or not?
Usually not. It's pretty much digital, yeah. I mean, there's a little bit of noise, but I don't know. I haven't noticed it.
Yeah, that's interesting because I remember that the comfort noise was actually a thing that they were putting in at one point. Maybe they stopped with that. It was because you would, maybe it's sort of like the 33 RPM record or the 45, any of the vinyl. There's that noise there that the listeners like. That's one of the things they like about vinyl. It's always got that scratch going on there.
On that Vectrex screen there, I see the thing say Mindstorm. Is that like an overlay that's on the screen?
That's it. Yeah.
That's an overlay.
That is the overlay. This is,
I see. Okay, it is an overlay.
So this is the overlay.
Normally they had different colors. At Mindstorm, it's all blue.
And so you go and just fit it in, trying to do all this backwards, but then you get down and
listen.
turn it on, see if it does. There it is.
And the program already, the system and the program is now running. So this is a fast machine.
Oh, the boot up, right? There's no boot up. How do you like that?
Yes.
Hey,
Yeah.
So are
maybe
all
you don't really need all those giant 3-minute
all
boot
of
ups.
those characters are all done with vector graphics?
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is, you see, there's no cartridge in here. This is a built-in game. And so
And you
so this is the game. I'm going to have to disappear from the screen if I'm going to do any of this. But you see you can move the lever back and forth, and we're about to be blown. So we have.
I like the idea of the spaceship that is throwing these stars out there. It's a radical version.
So the more objects you have on the screen, then the more the program and software has to work in order to perform the same.
Didn't bring it up, but I have armor attack.
Oh, cool. Wait, we couldn't hear his question because
Switch down the tone so
we can't hear the question.
Yeah, we have about 5 minutes for the panel, and then.
Did you ask a question about the game or something? We couldn't hear.
No.
So the each game came with a cartridge and a screen that would go on, and then you could see from the screen, or even if I keep the volume down, you can see that keep it down how long vectors you could draw, because what's on the screen in the game represents about the amount of time you have to draw vectors. So you can draw all those objects. The big objects take longer to draw than the small objects, so you can have, to pick a number, you can have 15 little objects, or 10 medium objects, or 5 large objects.
And as you can see, there's text on the screen and numbers and text, and that's also done with the vector graphics as well. It's all generated. There's no other graphics chip or anything in it.
But later games, I think they were using sprites, right? On the machine, was that possible?
Well, the sprite is a term it's a word that is used for objects in a video game, I believe, as far as I know. I mean,
Okay,
like on an Atari game, on an Atari game you'd have different sprites would be the objects.
Do you want me to get another cartridge, and I have armor attack out? Do you want to see a different game?
Yeah, at the ending, wonderful.
Bear with me for a second.
To listen to the sounds of this machine, because you used a very unique, this sound chip was not really often used, right?
It was a sound chip out of arcade games. It was directly taken from the arcade games. It was from a company called General Instruments. So we thought, well, we could get a good price on it, and we could do all the same sounds as the games.
So it's a sound chip that's inside in the machine. How many?
Yes.
How many? What's the sample rate of the sound?
There's no sample rate. What it is
Analog?
well, of course that's not true, is it? Wait a minute. There's a master clock going into the sound chip. That's right. But it uses like dividers to divide down the master clock to produce a square wave. So there's three, I think there's three of those divider chains. So you can have three different tones, I think. Plus you can have noise, and noise is generated by a shift register, a feedback shift register, which gives that, is how you generate a random noise thing. So we could have three tones plus noise, just, and it was a very, very cool sound chip. It was amazing we were able to put that in there. We've always thought that the powers in charge would say, no, that's too expensive, we can't put that in.
So this is the Armor Attack game. They came in a box like this, pull out the cartridge.
What does the cartridge look like?
Show us the cartridge, please. We didn't see it.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is the cartridge. And looks like that. It's got, you can see the end of a circuit board in there. And the cartridge there. It comes also with a nice instruction booklet. Wonderful. This is part of my game collection from that. And then out of this comes the screen.
Overlay.
The overlay. So if you, Gerry,
Yeah.
let me
Turn it off.
turn off machine.
Should probably turn it off to change the cartridges.
Yes, always.
And so that when the cartridge goes in, it overrides the built-in game.
So the cartridge is just a ROM, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay.
And by the way, though, we put out enough signals to have up to 32K cartridge, which was a lot at the time. None of the cartridges used 32K. They were like 4K and 8K. I don't know if we went any higher than that. But we figured in the future, because before you were asking questions about the future planning, and we did have that ability for the 32K, which no other games had that. Atari, had 4K, and then to get higher up, they would have to use bank switching and all these fancy schemes. But this had regular 32K.
Now we see Armor Attack with overlay, played by Jay Smith.
Yeah, right. Play it from upside down.
Play it upside down, right.
One should be for driving.
Whoa, I did it. Looking up.
Okay.
I'm playing upside down.
Okay, we get the idea, I would say.
So that's
Yeah, we have reached 8 o'clock, and this means we have all to have a little break here and set things up for the next panel. And we like to thank you that you took all this time to chat about the Vectrex with us.
well, what fun for us. Certainly we encourage anybody who wants to contribute to that, get involved, and make something new. New is wonderful. So, and I'd be glad to participate in some future activities or whatever. So just let me know. And
Thanks for all your insightful and thought-provoking questions.
so as you can see, Gerry is a fountain of information. Once we stir his memory, he did a lot of the work and was responsible for a lot of the innovation.
Thank you very much, Gerry.
Okay,
and
bye-bye
thank you
then.
very much, Jay. It was a pleasure to speak to you, and it's a pleasure to play with your product.
Bye-bye then.
Okay, you want to say bye?
No. Well, thank you very much for appearing on our program. This is very great. And I guess
John,
I'll take a short break now.
Yeah, that's
John, the next time you're in Malibu, give me a call. We're
Actually,
as I said-
Malibu was where I actually wrote that song on the space station, so
Yes.
go check it out.
okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye then.
Okay, so now we